Welcome to 4 Minutes Closer to God. My name is Doug. Today we're going to discuss slavery versus sonship. Why would anybody who's a slave want to go back to it after they've become free, a son in freedom? So it's important to note that the sonship refers to both males and females because it is a legal distinction and not a biological one. So let's bear that in mind. And the daughters did not get as much of a reward from the fathers as the sons did, especially the firstborn son. And we are sons in Christ, who is our brother, and we are co-heirs with him. And so why would anybody want to go back into slavery? And that's the big question. I'm afraid I do it more often than I would like. And so coming from Egypt, going into the promised land, the Egyptians were chasing the Israelites, and the Israelites then started to look back fondly on things in Egypt because they were having manna every day, that honeyed bread tasting seed-like food that God had provided as the bread from heaven. They wanted some leeks and onions and something else, and so they longed to go back to Egypt, and they wanted to go back to Egypt when they were facing the battles that were ahead of them once they would enter the promised land. And they wanted to get rid of Aaron and Moses and hire new leaders to take them back to Egypt. So why would slaves want to return to slavery? They had this lack of faith. And so it really hinges categorically on the amount of faith you would have. So the difference then between a son and a slave comes from Romans 8:15-17. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery that returns you to fear, but you received the spirit of sonship, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. And if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, so that we may also be glorified with him. Well, that means we have to suffer with him in order to be glorified, and that requires faith. So what sort of definitions or characteristics might we find between a slave and a son? God is a master to appease for a slave, but he is a father to be loved for a son. God is our dependent. We need to depend upon God as sons and be interdependent with others, but as a slave, you seek independence, self-reliance, and trust no one. In a slave, you love the law, it sets up boundaries for you, and obedience is preferred over relationship. Whereas a son lives by the law of love and gives it away freely to other people. The slave is insecure and acts right in order to please God, so as not to be punished, where a son is at peace and rest in God's grace. The slave is addicted to praise, approval, acceptance, where the son is totally accepted in God's love and grace. The slave serves for personal gain in order to impress God, where the son serves out of love and gratitude to God. The slave tries to earn God's favor by doing Christian disciplines of prayer and fasting and Bible study and the like. But for the son, that just brings intimacy with God. It is a joy and a pleasure. For a slave, they strive for holiness in order to win God's favor. But the son seeks holiness in order to gain God's intimacy, in order to be like God. The slaves have low self-image and are often self-rejecting, where the son is secure in the father's love, even if failing. The slave, his heart is shut off from true love and seeks comfort in addictions and busyness. The son basks in unconditional love of the father and finds true comfort in quietness. For the slave, they relate to peers by competition and jealousy and hate the success of others, where a son is secure in his own identity and the peers are dealt with in honor and value. Slaves build themselves up by tearing others down. They ruin relationships by control, by critical attitude, lack of respect, or honor. However, the son is relationship-oriented, seeks to restore others in love and gentleness and protect others from humiliation and exposure. The slave lacks humility and understands authority only as mistreating them, where the son respects authority and is teachable. The slave cannot even accept godly correction because they must be right, and they find fault with others when they are corrected. The son sees correction as a blessing because without growth, there is no maturity, and without maturity, the inheritance is lacking. So the slave, his heart is closed to love, whether to give it or receive it, whereas the son, love is open, transparent, and affectionate. So, are you a slave or a son? That's the big question. Where's your faith lie? And how can you improve over time? That's my goal. Maybe it's yours.